Welcome into the GoVols247 Podcast, a post-game edition of the podcast. I believe we are live on YouTube as well. We are trying something new, so pardon our progress. Forgive us if we have any hiccups in our production here, but I do believe we are also live on
I think
YouTube.
we are.
All right, I love this. We are moving up in the world. We're fancy. We're high dollar now. So. Awesome. That is awesome. We are trying some new things here. I am Ben McKee. I'm joined by Patrick Brown on this edition of the podcast. Like I mentioned, a post-game edition of the podcast because Tennessee beat Syracuse 45-26. A pretty decisive win for the Vols in Atlanta. Myself and Patrick were unable to make it. If you follow me on social media, you know I'm dealing with some health stuff right now. And then unfortunately for Patrick, good old Patrick got roped into a fall wedding, which I'll let him explain that for himself.
Is it really still fall? It's pretty hot outside. It felt like fall this week in Knoxville. But yeah, well, like one of my last high school, my buddies from high school, the last one of our group is getting married this weekend. So only right. It's only the second game I've missed since 2011. So and he's an Auburn grad, so they're a basketball school, so they don't really have to schedule around college football anymore.
Well, we will excuse it. We're going to talk Joey Aguilar first and foremost because I think Joey game ball number one today. I had a different game ball number one earlier in the football game, but as the football game played out, I think Joey Aguilar took over that game ball number one. So we're certainly going to touch on Joey Aguilar and the offense here in our first portion of the show / podcast, and then we'll touch on the defense on the back end before we get out of here. And I just kind of gave my big takeaway, Patrick, off the top is that Joey Aguilar was very, very impressive today. He was further along within this offense than I was anticipating, just given the nature of his offseason. What were your takeaways, your initial reaction to watching Joey Aguilar play for the first time?
Yeah, I thought he played really well. And you could hear kind of Josh Heupel talk about that. That was sort of his sentiment too, talking about him after the game. He was almost like, I don't want to say in shock, but he was just like, man, it's really impressive that he, is only joined this program 3 months ago. And to go out and operate and execute the offense as well as they did. I mean, Tennessee played. We saw a lot of different things from Tennessee today. That was probably another one of my big takeaways is like, we heard some players say some stuff this offseason about like a new offense. And we saw, I think, a lot of new wrinkles. Probably when you go back and watch it, probably even more when I go back and see it. But, you come out early and do some condensed formations. You saw some different things with some alignments that we haven't really seen Tennessee do. It wasn't all spread everybody across the field, sideline to sideline the entire game. So I think that was really good. And to do that with a guy that's, yes, a veteran quarterback, but a first game in your system, I think that was really important. And Josh Heupel said afterwards that was a testament to what Aguilar did just during the offseason preparing and what he did in camp too. So, and really, I think my biggest takeaway is that he made a lot of winning plays. I think he played winning football today. And Tennessee gets this version of Joey Aguilar. I think they're going to win a lot of football games this season. Certainly, there's some other things that maybe need to come along or shore up. I don't think anybody's saying they were perfect today by any stretch, but Joey operated the offense well. I think the two best plays he made were obviously the long ball over the top to Braylon Staley in the second quarter. And then the play where he rolled to his left, extended the play on 3rd and goal, or it might not have been 3rd and goal, but 3rd down in the red zone and made the play to Star Thomas, giving his guy a chance to make a play there. I think those are probably the two best plays. But Ben, for all the talk about his interceptions and all that, and certainly that'll be something he has to continue to do. But I don't really recall him putting the football in harm's way very much. I know they had the fumble on the mesh point. That's sort of a group thing. That's sort of a two players are sort of involved in that. But other than that, didn't really come close to throwing an interception, and that was obviously a big talk and has been a big talking point all offseason. So really positive day for Joey Aguilar and something certainly he can build on. And certainly I think for a lot of his teammates and his coaches, it should inject a lot of confidence. Not that they didn't have it already, and a lot of trust. Not that they didn't have it already, but certainly seeing him go out there play like that, I think will be a really big boost to him and the team and the coaching staff as well.
Yeah, the fact that he did not put the football in harm's way was the biggest thing that stood out to me today. I mean, maybe there was a throw here or there, but I think any quarterback
high throws, yeah. A couple of those were under pressure though, kind of off the back foot, and maybe some easy completions that you just got to make. They got away with it today, but when you're playing some better defenses, you can't afford to throw a little bit high to Mike Matthews when he runs a great route. You can't throw wide on, if you've got a stop route out wide and the DBs are playing off. You've got to be able to complete those. I think there was one to Staley he threw high, and Staley wasn't really able to get going after the catch. I think that was in the second half. That's a throw that if you give him, you put on his numbers, he's able to turn them quickly. Maybe he's able to make a move and you get more than just a couple yards out of it. So they talked about that during the broadcast quite a bit. And that was probably the only big negative, was just some of the high throws that technically and fundamentally you got to continue to clean up, because those windows will get tighter as you go through the SEC.
And I expect those things to get cleaned up. I don't know that it's going to be perfect. And something that I talked about this week was something that I heard Jordan Rodgers bring up, and that was, like, you see the big throw. There's a lot to like when you turn on the tape for Joey Aguilar, but there's also some easy throws involved that he makes difficult for himself. And I thought you saw that late in the first quarter, to where there were some gimme throws that the receiver probably could have helped out a little bit, but Joey was just slightly inaccurate, and it threw off the course of the play and kind of stalled offensively there for a moment. But he was able to really get going after a couple of missed throws there late in the first quarter. And as I was mentioning a moment ago, I would expect those throws that are high here, high there to get cleaned up as Joey goes the rest of this month and into the thick of the season. You kind of have to take his performance with a grain of salt. And I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you've really got to be excited, because I thought he played really well today. And there's still so much room for growth. And he's not even fully comfortable within the system with his receivers. I thought Louis Riddick did a great job of detailing that, of how things will improve as they go. So there's a lot to like there. But that was what I was most impressed with, is that he did not put the football at risk. There were not turnover prone throws that he was making. And like I mentioned, maybe one or two, but any quarterback, even Patrick Mahomes, plays a 60-minute football game. There's going to be a throw or two that he gets away with that maybe the defense should have picked off. But I thought he was really clean with the football. That was kind of the thing that I was most interested to see from Joey. And the other thing that I loved that we saw from Joey today was his toughness. Because there was a moment where there was a bit of an injury scare. Tennessee's in 13 personnel. He throws a slant to Ethan Davis in the end zone that's not completed, and he kind of goes down after the throw. He wasn't hit. It was a non-contact injury of sorts, and almost looked like his oblique. I think some people pointed to the hip is what he was pointing at on the sideline, but he was in the medical tent. Both backups were warming up, and He guts it out, goes back in. You could tell he was gimpy on that designed run on 3rd and 4, but still was able to, even after that injury, kind of grit through it and make some plays when Syracuse had all the momentum, and he was able to steal it back.
Yeah, and even that run you talked about, Ben, he goes down hard on his throwing shoulder, and you could tell he was kind of feeling a little bit there. So, yeah, some of the things that we heard about him and saw from him at Appalachian State, you saw in this game. I really liked. Again, you mentioned the throw. I think the only really throw that was a couple of those RPOs. Sometimes you get linebackers and safeties biting up. Sometimes they kind of stop in their tracks and just sort of play the passing lanes, and you're trying to throw a slant. So sometimes those can get a little dicey. But that's not really, you're trying to fit a football through a tight window. That's just going to happen. But he had a good scramble early in the game. I think there was a 3rd down in the red zone that they converted. On an option where he kept the ball. That was a really nice design play. Had some good lead blocking there. And yeah, even some missed throws, I think in the first quarter, he had a couple maybe misses early on, and then comes back and converts a 3rd down with a nice throw in a tight zone window where you're able to sort of move the defense around with where you're looking. I thought that was a really veteran kind of play. But yeah, you see a guy that can do some things with his legs. You see a guy that can make throws. He can stretch the field a little bit. Now, early, what was it, the second play? He had the deep shot to Mike Matthews that was underthrown, but it got it was Brazel that drew the pass interference penalty. But I'm sure Tennessee fans were probably like, on the Staley throw, were like, Nico would have overthrown that one. There were some fans out there that's like, hey, we got ourselves a quarterback now that can hit the deep ball. So yeah, a lot of positives. Again, Joey's got to avoid, he's got to avoid the day where maybe he's just off and is a little bit more erratic. And as you touched on, he's got to clean up those high throws, because if you're throwing high over the middle, sometimes that can, overthrow your guy and it hits a safety in the numbers, you got to worry about that. But this is all we have really to judge him on, and I think there's a lot of positives. And like I said, my biggest takeaway is on Aguilar is if he plays this way within himself, within the scheme, doesn't try to do too much, is able to make some things happen improvisationally at times, and is able to extend some drives this way, I think Tennessee's going to win a lot of games this season, particularly once they maybe get some guys back on defense and some of these receivers that didn't help him out sometimes. There were some drops, some catches that maybe could have been made. Once those guys grow a little bit, certainly with what else they have on this team, if he plays this way, they're going to win a lot of football games this season, I think.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you're really excited about Joey Aguilar and the season that he could potentially have. And it was asked to me during a radio interview Friday afternoon, like, who does he remind you of? And my comparison was Hendon Hooker. And I thought we saw some Hendon Hooker type of things today with the legs and just the grit and the determination, the deep ball. I'm this is going to be overreacting. And it's okay.
Week one, you have to overreact.
That's right. His next test will be a big one. But
ETSU?
Yes, ETSU. You know what I mean. But hear me out. I'm going to throw this out there.
I'm hearing you out, Ben.
Joey Aguilar can have a Hendon Hooker type of season this year. And I don't even necessarily mean the Heisman contention, and I don't think that Joey's going to be thrown to a Biletnikoff Award winner, but I really feel comfortable and confident that Joey Aguilar is going to have a really strong season after what I saw today. That's the basis of that thought, that I think that there can be some Hendon Hooker type of magic this season.
That's the wired take. The tired take is that he's going to be an upgrade on what Tennessee got from Nico last year. I'll just stick with that. I'm not ready to go Hendon. Hendon is maybe it's just kind of I don't want to say nostalgia, but like, as you get further away from it, you kind of like grow.
It's easy. It's the low hanging fruit
to just be like, man, he's as you get further away from Hendon's year, you're like, man, he was so good. And then you might go back and watch it, and you're like, okay, maybe he was as good. I don't know. I mean, that's a bold take, Ben McKee, but I will allow it.
Does Joey Aguilar have more of a Hendon Hooker type of season or more of a Nico Iamaleava type of season? Let me ask you that.
Probably lean toward. Well, he's already thrown for as many touchdown passes against FB or Power 4 teams than Nico did, right? Didn't Nico stat pad against Chattanooga and UTEP and Kent State? I don't know. I don't have the numbers in front of me.
Those
Nico plays for UCLA now, so I don't really remember much of his numbers and what he did and all that.
Fair enough. I did not mean to get us on a Nico tangent. I apologize. There are two other things we need to discuss on the offensive side of the football before we transition to defense. First and foremost, I guess we'll start with the offensive line, because the running backs were able to have a big day because of the offensive line. And of course, the running backs helped out the O-line as well. Deshaun Bishop was Houdini a couple of different times, and then Star Thomas and Peyton Lewis ran angry as well. But shocking news or out of the blue news right before kickoff that David Sanders Jr. isn't going to play. From what we understand, he's dealing with a minor shoulder injury, and Josh Heupel said afterwards that it happened kind of late during Wednesday's practice. Friday, everybody thought David Sanders Jr. was playing. This morning, that changed. The medical staff, according to Josh Heupel, felt like it was best that they hold off and he not play. So his debut will have to wait until next Saturday against ETSU. But you would have never known that Tennessee was missing its 5-star offensive tackle over there on the right side of the offensive line, because you slide Jesse Perry over to right tackle. He makes his first career start in a pinch. He was going to start at right guard, we think. But has to slide over and start at right tackle. I thought he did a good job, especially given the circumstances. Again, he's preparing to make his first career start. It's going to be at right guard. Last minute, he has to slide out and play tackle. I thought he really handled himself well. And as a result of Jesse Perry sliding out to right tackle, it seems like Sham Umarov only works on the left side. So Sham Umarov starts at left guard. Wendell Moy slides over to right guard. Sam Pendleton starts at center. And you had some others mixed in there. William Satterwhite got in. Lance Hurd obviously played, I believe, the whole game at left tackle. But I thought a really, really strong debut for what I have been deeming a rejuvenated offensive line with Glenn Ellerbe this season.
Yeah, I think you got to give a lot of credit to those players, like you talked about with Perry having to, switch kind of last minute. Because like you said, as Heupel indicated after the game, they were anticipating that Sanders was going to play as of Friday. So that was a day of the game kind of switch. So you got to credit those players for being able to mentally adjust. Certainly Perry going from guard to tackle, that's a big change. Even Moy going from left guard to right guard. He's a guy that's played both those positions, but has played mostly on the left side. So credit to him. And Umarov coming in there as well. Yeah, would they have maybe two penalties, procedure kind of penalties? One of them I think was probably offsides, more than somebody jumping, but didn't give up any sacks. I don't really feel like they gave up a lot of pressure. Aguilar didn't take too many hits that I can recall. And you run for 240 something yards. So really good job by those guys. I also think Glenn Ellerbe deserves a lot of credit. He's off the schneid because now he's had 2 high school recruits start. So we can officially pour one out for that narrative. It's as over as Vol calls. Yeah, they did a lot of mixing and matching in preseason camp. And they, there were some people on the checkerboard that were worried, when it kind of gets out there that Sanders is not playing, he's in street clothes and everything. But it's like, well, they've got 2 options that we know they worked on quite a bit. The one they used, obviously, was one. The other one was just kicking Pendleton over to right guard, shifting Perry to right tackle, and put Satterwhite in at center. But, Ellerbe and them, they, fostering that competition throughout the preseason camp, they worked on a lot of different combinations. And they knew it would have to pay off at some point, or they knew they'd have to go to one of those contingency plans at some point. Probably didn't hope it would be the first one, but they did and executed pretty well. Again, they will have tougher tasks. Syracuse is going to be a team, I think, based on today, that's going to score a lot of points, but also give up a lot of points. So, but this offensive line did a good job of adjusting on the fly and playing really well. I mean, that was a group of 4 new starters, and you wouldn't have known it from how they played.
No, not at all. And you also would not have known that Tennessee was replacing Dylan Sampson after Dylan Sampson broke the program's single-season rushing record a season ago. I tell you, and we've all talked about it throughout fall camp and even further back into the summer. These running backs are going to be so much fun to watch. And I don't know who deserves the most snaps out of the top 3. Deshaun Bishop, he looked phenomenal. I loved that Peyton Lewis touchdown run where there was a block that was whiffed, and it's mano a mano, and Peyton Lewis just said, no, I'm scoring this touchdown, and runs through a defender. I thought Peyton Lewis looked like a totally different back than his true freshman version that we saw last year. And then Star Thomas, heck of a debut for him as well. Talk about transfers and Joey Aguilar shining. Star Thomas was very impressive in his debut. I don't think Tennessee fans quite realize what they have in Star Thomas. I mean, this is a trio that I talked about it a little bit with Jason Swain on Thursday, and he wasn't having any of it. But I think it's a trio. Here I am with my comparisons again. I think this is a trio that can really rival the trio of that 23 team. I guess it was 22-23, the Jalen Wright, Jabari Small, Dylan Sampson trio. Like I think this trio is going to be just as good. And I again, like the offensive line, the early returns are strong.
Yeah, I mean, just really good performance by all 3 of those guys. Deshaun Bishop had a couple of big plays catching the football. He took a screen. That was early in the game. They ran a screen pass. That was like, hey, what's that? They have, that was something that we haven't really seen them do, kind of a traditional middle screen with a running back. That converted a first down. He had the swing pass where there were some good blocks on the perimeter that he kind of set up. He kind of used his ability to set up those blockers and set up those lanes, and he had a big play there. He had the big play right before halftime, which I think was a key stretch in the game because Syracuse scores with, a minute 55 left. You're looking at a chance for them to you get within 10. If you get a stop there, you get the ball to start the second half. You could score and be within 3, and it's a ball game at that point. But Bishop does a great job of breaking a tackle of a defensive tackle in the backfield and goes for 40-something yards, and he finishes that run off. Him and Lewis really did a good job finishing through contact, running through guys. And Star Thomas, he's never going to probably have a lot of breakaway 40-yard runs, but I think he's going to rip off a lot of runs like you saw today, 10, 15, maybe gets to 20 yards because he has really good acceleration. He bounces off tacklers. Everybody kind of looked at his yards per carry number at Duke. It was around 4, so not huge, but he was like top 10 in the ACC in runs of 10 plus yards. So he did a good job of, if he's got a vertical seam, he hits it and he's able to bounce and spin off some guys like you saw today. And I thought his best play was the touchdown catch. I mean, that's a guy that's caught 50 plus passes in his career. You saw that on that one because he made a contested catch with the defender on him. I can't remember the last time Tennessee had a running back go and make a contested catch in a game. Usually those guys are catching swing passes, screen passes, shovel passes if you're Dylan Sampson. So for him to go out there and look like a receiver and make that play, I think that taps into the kind of what what Tennessee liked about Star Thomas when they got him. So that's a really good trio. And especially that fourth quarter drive, Josh Heupel kind of bristles anytime you suggest that his offense is finesse or anything like that. He would have loved that 4-minute drill drive where they just kind of pounded it down Syracuse's throat, ran off 5 minutes the clock, and then punctuated with a touchdown to kill the game off. So really good job by that group today. And Heupel has talked about how much he likes that group, and he said that after the game too. And based on the evidence today, they should be able to lean on those guys interchangeably throughout the season.
I do want to touch on the receivers quickly before we transition to defense. We do need to talk about defense, and we're 20 minutes in. We're going to get Ryan Callahan in here in a few minutes as well.
Ryan goes all our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, yes. Here in 12 minutes, we'll go down to just my mom listening and watching probably. But Ryan is at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. He is our boots on the ground today, with me dealing with my health stuff and Patrick having to deal with kind of a fall wedding. I say kind of because it's August 30th, but a fall wedding. But before we get there, and please, if you're listening, watching, A, thank you. B, if you aren't subscribed to our YouTube page, if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, we'd greatly appreciate that. And leave us a comment. Ask us a question if you've got one. Rory Conway dropped by earlier in the live stream, Patrick, and said receivers need to catch the ball, and catch the ball is all caps. And a bit of a mixed bag maybe for the receivers today. I think more good than bad, but certainly there's some plays that they can clean up and get better at. And I think you'll see them get better as we progress here these next couple of weeks. Those guys missed camp. They were in and out of the lineup during camp. Mike Matthews was sidelined at times. Braylon Staley was sidelined at times. Chris Brazzell the same way, that he missed more time than anybody. We didn't see the freshmen as much as I thought we would see. Rodarius Jackson, Travis Smith Jr. I mean, it was basically the three. I don't even remember seeing Amari Jefferson at all. It was basically Brazzell, Matthews, Staley. And the one that I was really impressed with, again, I don't think they had a bad day. I just more good than bad, plenty to clean up. But I thought Braylon Staley was terrific.
Yeah, I would say it was shaky early. But I think if you put it in the context of kind of what they dealt with during camp, as you kind of laid out, probably more positives than negatives, right? I mean, they still made some plays. They probably made more plays than they didn't make. There were a couple drops. Brazzell had one hit him in the 17 that he should have caught. He had one where he took a pretty hard hit that was almost a fumble. Probably a little heart and throat moment there for some Tennessee fans there with Syracuse having momentum. That play was bang, bang. But and then Matthews should have caught one that was catchable, maybe a little high, but they still made some plays. Matthews had a short catch after the long Deshaun Bishop run just before halftime, where he was able to put a couple of moves on some guys. That's something that we didn't really see a whole lot from Tennessee's wide receivers last season. So I think that's a positive sign. But we're overreacting a little bit in this podcast, but we also need to keep in mind that this is just the first game, right? And as Josh Heupel is going to say a million times over the next few weeks, teams have to get better throughout the course of the season. I think that's the receivers are a position group that theoretically at least should continue to get better as those guys get more experience, as they get more time on task with Aguilar, as they get healthier and more into the flow. So you got to make some of those plays that you didn't make, because in some games later this year, you're not going to be able to afford to leave those opportunities out there. But given everything that group's been through, I think there were a lot of positives to take from this game, and now they just need to continue to move forward and keep those things, clean up those things, but also focus on what they did well in this one.
Do you feel the same way about the defense? Because I expected a cleaner performance for the defense out of the gate. There is plenty that needs to be cleaned up before the Georgia game in 2 weeks. shoot before the Mississippi State game here even further than the Georgia game. But I don't know. I'm kind of confused on how I should feel about the defense, because they were dominant in the first quarter, and then as bodies started to drop, the rope kind of continued to disappear and disappear. It just continued to get sloppier. There were a couple of big time plays there at the tail end of the game to nix some momentum for Syracuse, but I kind of, yes, there's things that need to be cleaned up, but I also think that you also have to realize that they were shorthanded there at the end of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, they played most of this game without Jackson Moy. He goes down in the first series. They played a lot of this game without Ricky Gibson, already not having Jermon McCoy and David Hobbs. So you get even more depleted at that position. Saw a lot of Ty Redmond, and him and Colton Hood were the corners for a lot of this game, and I thought they plugged right in. If there was a positive on the defense, it's the secondary. I know it's weird saying that, given that they gave up almost 300 passing yards, but when they let those guys play man, they played pretty well. When they sat back in zone and didn't get pressure, that's when Steve Angeli and was able to find openings. And he's a veteran heady quarterback that's going to be able to, if he sees what coverage you're playing, he's going to be able to pick apart. And Syracuse had some good concepts too that created, when you're going against zone, you're going to create conflicts where, defenders are going to have to sort of, pick who they're defending and things like that. So really, if you're Tennessee, you're going to point to about 7-8 plays on 3rd and 4th down in this game that you gave up. I mean, there was a 4th down in the 3rd quarter where, Tim Banks calls up a slot blitz on a rollout. That should be a sack, and Boo Carter just doesn't make the play. Andre Turrentine's back there too, and I don't know where he was going. He overran the play pretty bad. That was a play where you got to make. There was the 4th and 1 inside the 5 in the 2nd quarter, which is just sort of a mano-a-mano kind of play because Syracuse was running it, and it was obvious they were running it, and they just kind of got the yard they needed. And there were some 3rd downs too, but when they let those corners play man coverage in your face, those guys were all over those receivers. So eventually, if you get Gibson back in the lineup, whenever you get Jermon McCoy back down the road, that should be a really strong position, and you should probably never play zone because you should let those guys play man the entire time. But Jalen McMurray makes the play to set up the T-Lane interception. That was a smart play to get in the passing lane. Idris Farouk, Roman center field, made a couple of nice plays. But it almost was like they were sometimes just trying not to give up a home run. And they gave up some chunk plays that way. But yeah, I would, it's not, they're going to get back, and they're going to be probably not very happy with how they play. They expect to play a lot better than they did. They still did some good things, as you mentioned, Ben, early in the game. They were able to make some stops, get some sacks on 3rd down with Arion Carter and Edwin Spillman on some good blitzes that, were able to allow Tennessee to get ahead, the scoop and score with Colton Hood, and Nate Robinson coming out of nowhere to make a couple of big plays early in the game too. So they did some good things early, and then they were able to get a couple stops there in the 4th quarter where the game was still a little shaky. But a lot of the middle of it, they're not going to be happy about. And yes, they run the field a lot too. They played 12 plays in the 1st quarter and 3 minutes in the 4th quarter. I think Syracuse was at over 70 plays. So they were just on the field a lot. At one point in the 2nd quarter, the play disparity was 27-5. So their defense was on the field a lot, throwing the injuries, first game, guys cramping. You're going to have some guys go down and everything. So they'll be disappointed, and they probably should be. I don't think they played well enough as they want to, and certainly they need to get better in some areas. But as with a lot of games, there's some bad, but there's also some good. And going from one, this game to the next game, they're going to be a lot more. They're going to be a lot tighter. Josh Heupel talked about having they can beat better in some of the zone stuff they did. They've never been a great zone team under Tim Banks, which makes you wonder why they play it as much as they do sometimes. So, but they'll review it and go back. But certainly, I think they need to get better from this point.
What is your biggest concern on that side of the ball out of all of that? Is it the amount of injuries in game 1? Is it the question mark of depth on the interior of the defensive line, or is it something else?
I would say a little bit of the depth on the defensive line. I would also say the pass rush was, I don't feel like it made a huge impact on the game. Josh Joseph had the sack right before half. Nathan Robinson makes the sack for the scoop and score. That was almost a coverage sack because he had to push his way into the backfield for a few seconds. And then the other 2 sacks were blitzes by linebackers. So, can they get more of Joseph's making an impact? What can they get out of Caleb Herring and Jordan Ross? Those are a couple players that should theoretically, again, continue to come on. Ross had the tackle for loss on a run play. So if they're going to play zone, they've got to have guys that can get to the quarterback a little bit better. And that's where not having James Pierce, Norman Lott, losing David Hobbs, because I think he would be a guy that's potentially on the field in those situations. I think that's something that's an area that didn't show up very much today that I think they need to continue to grow with.
Before we get you out of here and get Ryan Callahan in here, what about the positives on defense? Who stood out to you? For me, it was Nathan Robinson. I thought Edris Farouk had a strong debut at safety. I liked what I saw from Ty Redmond. And then I think my favorite player on defense today, I thought Arion Carter did a great job of flying around before he seemed like he was dealing with cramps. He had to go back to the locker room and get an IV at one point. But my favorite player on defense today for Tennessee was Jalen McMurray. I mean, I know he had the one defensive pass interference, but he was everywhere, man, and just constantly sticking his fan in the face or his face in the fan. If
there
I
you
can
go.
get it out correctly. I'm distracted by the football game is what I'll say, but
you're distracted by Alabama losing is what you're distracted by.
Yeah, that I am, to be honest with you, but who stood out to you individually on the defensive side of the ball? Because there were some positives.
Yeah, I will start with Colton Hood. I think some of the offseason, he got talked up a lot this offseason. I think it was warranted based on what we saw today. Very sticky in coverage, aggressive. I mean, when they get those guys, hopefully at some point they have all four of those guys ready and rolling. Those four being Jermod, Ricky, Hood, and Ty Redmond. Because man, that's a really strong quartet right there. And Hood was, I did like, there were a couple of PI calls in this game both ways, but I thought for the most part the officials did a good job of letting those guys play a little bit on the outside. I like to see that. I don't like to see, those penalties where guys are both kind of jockeying and hand fighting. And so credit, the Big Ten officials didn't get every call right in this game, but they did let them play on the outside a couple of times. And I like that. And that'll fit Tennessee, right? Because as I mentioned, when they let those guys play like that, they're not giving up a lot of separation. When there's a lot of separation, they're sitting back in zone. Now I realize you can't play man every play because eventually they'll get beat. Just the odds, just the way the game is played. But yeah, they plugged Ty Redmond in there. I don't know how many pass breakups he ended up getting credited with, but he had at least a couple. And another long, lanky, athletic defender that he committed so long ago and was kind of just behind the scenes of this class that you don't really think about him doing a lot. But he first game he's more than stood in there and made the right plays. I mentioned Hood, mentioned Redmond. I should mention Jaden Harmon too. He's a guy that got a lot of run in the second half at linebacker, freshman that. I think did he get the batted pass at the line on that last fourth down late in the game? I think that was him, but you see him out there with, when Arion went down. So I don't think he was my favorite player. I'd stick with the two corners, but should mention him as a guy. And we should mention Nathan Robinson too, because we talked a lot about a lot of guys on the defensive line throughout the offseason. We did not talk about Nathan Robinson. He was a guy that was kind of lost in the shuffle. You wonder what his role is going to be, but he's the third defensive tackle, gets thrown in there right away, gets a quarterback hit on the first drive, and then gets the sack that was at a key point because Tennessee had just fumbled. And so credit to him. He's had some injuries that he's had to deal with. He was still playing with something on his hand. I think that thing might be permanently on his hand and wrist at this point because I feel like I haven't seen him without it for a long time. But, I'd stick with those three guys right there. Robinson coming out of nowhere, making an impact, and then the two corners.
Any final thoughts for us on the way out the door that we did not address? We'll get Callahan in here, and I'll pepper him with some questions about post-game stuff. Anything else that you and I have not brought up that you would like to discuss on your way out the door?
Well, Alabama's losing. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes. Did not see that one coming. I thought Thomas Castellanos, when he made those comments earlier this offseason, I thought he was a dead man walking, and boy, did he have.
Well, he's right though, because Nick Saban's not there. It used to be when you'd say stuff about Alabama, even if you said like, "Hey, we were playing Alabama next," they would take it and use it as fuel. But Nick Saban's not there anymore. So when he said that, I was like,
they said all disrespect would be handled.
Well, they're not backing up the talk right now. How many games did Florida State win last season? 2. Not many. But like, I mean. Yeah, I think this was a good win for Tennessee. We'll see what Syracuse looks like this season. Certainly this game didn't go quite as easily as the last two ACC early season matchups. They didn't blow Syracuse out of the water like they did Virginia and NC State. But like I said, Syracuse looks like a team that will probably win 6-7 games. Maybe they pick off. They play in 4 of the playoff teams from last season, so they got a tough schedule. But they look like they could put up a lot of points and give up a lot of points too. So we'll have to see if they, how that develops over the course of the season. But I thought Tennessee did a good job of being in control of the game. They started well. They played through some lulls and some back and forth in the second and third quarters, and then finished the game the right way with the 4-minute drive, and then the 4th down stop at the end. They finally got a 4th down stop. Wasn't Syracuse 3 of 3 at that point? So good win for Tennessee. I thought it was interesting that Heupel's 2 things he said after the game was he wants his players to celebrate wins more than he thinks that's something that maybe he didn't do a good enough job of earlier in his coaching career. But he also said earlier that the team as a whole needs to do a better job of playing 60 minutes because he thought their level dropped off a little bit in the second half. I think you could sense that. I think probably when they went up 38-14, right? Wasn't that the score at one point after they get the turnover and the touchdown early in the third quarter? So, they need to be able to sustain it for 60 minutes, like you said. And that is something I'm sure they will be preaching a lot going into the ETSU game. No offense to the Bucks. I don't know how they're doing against Murray State today, but that's a game where you're not going to see levels drop even if you get a big lead. They got a 3-touchdown, 24-point lead in this one, and maybe lit up a little bit, and it was kind of flirting with being a game there in the second half there with Syracuse coming back. And that was a team that came back from 21-3 down and against Virginia Tech last season and 21 down against Miami and won both those games. So Tennessee knew that they needed to shut those comeback attempts down, and eventually they did.
ETSU is currently up 7-0 on Murray State with 5 minutes to go in the first quarter. So that is your ETSU football update. Patrick, we'll get you out of here and get Ryan in here in just a moment. We greatly appreciate you and all your coverage, and sorry you have to deal with a fall wedding during the first weekend of college football.
It's all right, Ben. I'm just glad to see you. Hope you're feeling good today, and appreciate everything you did to help our coverage today. We had to sort of piece it together, being in 3 different places, but everyone go to GoVols247, check out our coverage from wherever we are. We're still, all of our stuff's in one spot, easy to find.
Absolutely. Patrick, thank you.
Appreciate it, Ben. Have a good one.
You too, buddy. We'll get Ryan in here right now. Look at us, Ryan. We are moving up in the world. How are you, my friend?
Doing all right. How about you, Ben?
Doing well. You sound great. Love the backdrop with James Pierce Jr.'s new home.
That's right.
Behind you. I'm going to pepper you with post-game press conference stuff shortly, but before we dive into all that fun stuff, what was your biggest takeaway from Tennessee's win this afternoon?
Man, like so many season openers we've seen across the country, just not everything you expected in multiple ways. I thought Tennessee's offense was probably better than a lot of people were expecting, and made a number of plays, and the offensive line absorbed the absence of David Sanders without any major issues there. So you got to give the offense a lot of credit for having a pretty good first day overall. Not perfect, but pretty good. And then on the flip side, some things the defense is really going to have to work on. Some absences they were already dealing with, and now we'll see how banged up they are coming out of this game. But had several injuries to deal with throughout the course of the game. I'm sure there will be plenty of hand wringing about exactly what went wrong for the defense, but I think you kind of start there, whether the players and coaches will point to that or not. I think the bottom line is there were a lot of guys out today that led to some of those issues they had. And Syracuse is a team that put up a lot of yards and a lot of points last year too. So I wouldn't discount what they did today as well. But I think we'll see a better defense from Tennessee going forward probably than we did today. And that is assuming they don't have any serious injuries to deal with going forward, because they were missing some key pieces that they had to adjust to during the game. And I think that really threw them off in some situations.
John Harden on YouTube says that Joey did what he needed to. Great job. I would agree with that. Ryan, what were your thoughts on Joey Aguilar?
I thought he was good. Yeah, it was funny. I was getting kind of a variety of texts from people during the game about just how he was looking. Some people were really excited and seeing on social media the first drive or two. People were kind of like, "All right, I'm in. Joey's got me hooked." And then some criticisms I would hear at times from some people talking about some of the high throws and missing a guy or two that he could have connected with. But overall, I thought I think he's going to give you a little bit of that. It's going to be a little bit of a roller coaster ride. I think a lot of times with Joey Aguilar, it's not going to be perfect. He's not a he's not a flawless guy. You know, he's going to play an imperfect game most of the time. But I think what he gives you is a guy who's willing to take some chances, and this offense needs a guy like that. I think we saw last year with Nico Iamaleava what can happen sometimes when you've got someone who's risk averse in this offense, not willing to take as many shots down the field, not willing to try to squeeze it into a tight window. It just doesn't flow as well. And I thought today he gave his guys opportunities to make plays, and they didn't make them all the time, but they made enough to make this offense more explosive. And that's why you saw Tennessee not having to lean quite as heavily on the run game, I think, as a lot of people thought they would today. The offense was very balanced, the yardage almost identical between passing and rushing. So I give Tennessee a lot of credit for finding ways to make plays. And sorry, I'm getting a call here, and I almost knocked my computer down trying to silence that. But yeah, live TV, not easy to make, right?
To be fair, you had no idea we were going to do this.
He did a lot of things well, and there's going to be plenty for him to go back and look at and clean up later when he looks at the film, I'm sure. But overall, I think you can't complain about the finished product and the results that Tennessee got from him. And I thought for a first game, it couldn't have gone much better given what Tennessee's offense dealt with during preseason camp with receivers being out and things like that.
To be fair to you, you had no idea we were doing this. You had no idea we were going to do this up until about 20 minutes ago. So yeah. It is all good. We are learning on the fly here, and we will get better as we go. Pardon our progress. What was the tone afterwards in regards to all of the injuries? Because I do think that played a role in how the defense performed in the second half. Yes, there are things that need to be cleaned up. It was not as clean as I was expecting. I thought the defense would be further ahead, but we did. The defense looked really good in the first quarter. It dominated the line of scrimmage in the first quarter. I thought, at least, and I thought injuries began to take a toll as the game wore on. So what was the tone in asking Josh Heupel for some injury updates, if he was able to give any, and just speaking to Heupel and some players?
Yeah, there didn't seem to be a lot of concern. Now, Josh Heupel didn't get asked a lot of direct questions about those, and I think part of the reason for that is he doesn't generally give away a whole lot on injuries, but he was specifically asked about David Sanders' availability going forward, and he seemed to at least indicate or hint maybe that he thought David Sanders would be out there, next week in some capacity as they get ready for the ETSU game, the home opener next weekend. But with that being said, he made it clear that David Sanders was a situation where he felt pretty good about his chances of playing going into game day, and that he just kind of woke up, spoke with trainers today, and they kind of made the decision not to play him. They thought that was, as Josh Heupel said, the best move for him in the long run, and that David Sanders was was kind of upset to find out about that, but took it well, and said his teammates, he was a good teammate on this day. And Tennessee's offensive line, I thought, did a pretty admirable job of kind of patching things up. Jesse Perry sliding over to right tackle. We've talked about him before as a guy who could be kind of that sixth man almost as a starter who can move to other positions too, and sort of allow Tennessee to get their best five on the field. And they had to show that right out of the gates today. So that's the big one. I think people were obviously caught off guard by that today. But some of the guys that got banged up during the game, Ricky Gibson obviously comes to mind. Arion Carter was back out there, and I think it's fine. So they've got some guys to maybe that are going to at least have to do some time in the training room coming out of this game. Now, how bad is it? Will anyone be held out next week? We'll have to wait and see about that. And most importantly, is there anything to worry about going forward to the Georgia game in a couple weeks? Obviously don't know about that yet, but that's the bottom line. Is Tennessee had some guys in and out of the lineup today, and I think that did affect them. As I said, I think that really did throw this defense off in particular at times. And they did a good job with some guys like Ty Redmond, Jaden Harmon, that you didn't expect to be thrust into significant roles. I'm surprised we saw Harmon out there at all, but it kind of shows you what they were dealing with from an injury perspective, that he got out there and did a pretty good job, I thought, for his first game.
What is your level of concern with the defense going forward? Do you kind of chalk it up like I do? Again, not 100% chalk up, but do you think that they were just really snake bitten there in the second half injury-wise, or how concerned are you with the defense going forward?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And I actually think there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Tennessee fan about the defense. I know they gave up 26 points today, but again, the one thing we don't know, how good is this Syracuse team in general going forward? You know, they may go on to be a pretty good team this year. We don't really know what to expect from them. I thought Steve Angeli made some good plays. So did John Tate Cook at wide receiver. He's obviously a talented guy that started his career at Texas, and I think they've got a couple nice running backs too. So Syracuse may end up being a better team than people are expecting. They've got a really tough schedule, but I give them credit for making some plays and scoring some points. But I mean, look at what Tennessee did right in this game, from the scoop and score by Colton Hood and the forced fumble by Nathan Robinson. How about Nathan Robinson going from a guy we weren't even talking about during camp and playing with a club on his hand and wrist at times during camp, to going out there and being the first guy off the bench at defensive tackle and making a huge play like that in the season opener, and then to have obviously the picks or the interception early in the second half where Jalen McMurray blitzes, bats the ball up in the air, and Jeremiah Thielander makes a great play to pick that one off. I thought that some of the coverage that those guys had at cornerback, some pass breakups by Colton Hood and some other guys in tight coverage, where I thought they did a really nice job and were aggressive and could have drawn some flags, frankly, on another play or two that Syracuse fans weren't happy were no calls. So they did some good things, even in a game where we're talking about the defense being off a little bit. And maybe the biggest thing they did well, 5 sacks. That's a higher sack total than they had in any single game last season. And last year, they were not an elite pass rushing team by numbers anyway, just inside the top 50 nationally in sacks. So for them to start off with that kind of performance, Josh Joseph's getting involved early. Tennessee with some well-timed blitzes that worked well. Tim Banks dialed up some good blitzes, as Josh Joseph pointed out after the game. Edwin Spillman and Arion Carter getting to the quarterback pretty effectively. So I thought there were a lot of good things, even in a shaky performance. And for the most part, like you said, I think the things that you saw go wrong, I mostly do chalk that up to the guys who were in and out of the lineup. I'm sure there are some things they can clean up and do better, but I don't see as many concerns that look like long-term things. The biggest concern for me, honestly, might be stopping the run, because at times today, they looked like they're going to be a little more human maybe against the run. They'll face teams that have better rushing offenses than Syracuse, I think. And so I'm wondering, with David Hobbs out, I felt like his absence was felt. With him out, though, they looked like they were maybe beatable by some good teams on the ground. And that's something I didn't really expect to see from this team. So we'll see how much they clean that up. Rodney Garner, we know, and Tim Banks, for that matter, really like stopping the run, pride themselves on that. I think they're going to want to clean that up, and I'll be interested in seeing how much better they look against the run in a couple weeks against Georgia.
What else stood out from post-game interviews? Anything from Josh Heupel or anything? Any quotes from the players that really caught your attention? What Joey Aguilar have to say after his first game?
Yeah, Joey Aguilar definitely. I think what you continue to hear from this group, the players and the coaches for that matter, just how close knit this team seems to be, and I think that they feel that had some impact on how they played today. And they, more talk about how this team responded to what happened at the end of spring practice with Nico Iamaleava leaving. That is a recurring theme for this team, and we continue to hear that from guys, and even players like Colton Hood, who came in after spring practice, continue to talk about that, and he's picked up on it since he got to Tennessee. Obviously, hearing it from his teammates and knowing how close this team has gotten over the past few months, especially. So that continues to come up. I think they know, you heard this from guys on both sides of the ball, they know they left a lot of plays out on the field or have a lot to clean up, but they felt pretty good about themselves overall to be in control basically from the first quarter on. They obviously did a lot of things well and had a double-digit lead from the middle of the first quarter on. So they know they've got a lot to work on, a lot to clean up. But at the end of the day, it's a game they kind of controlled from start to finish, and it's a lot easier to work on things coming off a win. I think they feel pretty good about what they got accomplished, considering, again, some of the hardships they faced in this game, from losing David Sanders going into the game to some guys going in and out of the lineup with injuries and things like that. And let's not forget, no Jermod McCoy in the secondary, and they still played pretty well back there. And, of course, no David Hobbs on the defensive line. So I think they know they dealt with some things today, but they're not going to make excuses about that. I think they know that when they go in and watch some of the film tomorrow, there'll probably be some pretty harsh critiques of some of the things they did wrong, especially on defense. and that'll give them plenty to work on. And that's something we heard from kind of everybody that spoke with reporters, including Star Thomas, who had a really nice game. That's one of the big positives. Tennessee's got a deep backfield. Even DeJuan Morris, the true freshman, got in the mix there. But Star Thomas was the leading rusher. Didn't see that coming. I thought Deshaun Bishop or maybe Peyton Lewis would be the leading rusher. We kept hearing about the progress Star Thomas made from spring to preseason camp. Boy, it showed today. He had a nice performance. Caught the touchdown pass, obviously, from Joey Aguilar. Braylon Staley catching the deep ball from Aguilar. We spoke with Staley as well. I think everyone pretty impressed by kind of the steady hand of Joey Aguilar. And he talked about how he maintains, kind of his calm, collected mindset and just doesn't seem to get shaken by a whole lot. He said, other guys are looking at me. I've got to be the one that kind of tells them everything's going to be okay, that lets them know not to panic. And they showed that today. It seemed like every time Syracuse got some momentum, Tennessee came right back and made a big play or drove right back down the field to take the momentum right back away from them. And that's something we've not always seen from Tennessee teams in recent years. This team kind of answered the bell every time they were tested. And I think Joey Aguilar had a lot to do with that.
He absolutely did. I was very impressed with Joey Aguilar, and I think Tennessee fans should be excited about the season that Joey Aguilar could potentially have. For those of us who were not able to make it and be in attendance today, what was the atmosphere like inside of Mercedes-Benz Stadium?
Yeah, pretty good. If you didn't see our posts and tweet with this, that the announced attendance was just under 46,000. So not a tremendous crowd in terms of numbers. There were a good number of unsold seats in the upper deck, but the Tennessee fans that were here, and they made up the vast majority of the crowd. It was a pretty small section of the stadium. It felt like that were Syracuse fans. I wouldn't want to put a number on it, but it felt like at least an 85-15, if not 90-10 or 95-5 split between the two fan bases. It was a predominantly Tennessee home game kind of feel, and Tennessee fans did their part and certainly showed up in big numbers. If you're having that many unsold seats and wanting to look for a reason to point to, it wasn't Tennessee fans not showing up. It was Syracuse fans not making the long trip, and probably because maybe they didn't think they had much of a chance to win. It's a long trip. But, Syracuse fans, I thought, might show up in better numbers. They're pretty excited coming off a 10-win season last year, but not a lot of them here. But it was still a pretty good atmosphere. The fans who were here were pretty excited. They got into it from the start, and Tennessee gave them reason to be engaged from the start. So pretty good atmosphere. These games in NFL stadiums are always kind of, interesting from that standpoint. If it's not in Nashville where Tennessee just takes over the place and fills it up to the top, it's often a little bit of an not the same as having a game at Neyland Stadium, but still fun. And I think the fans who came to Atlanta were excited to be here and enjoyed themselves. And we're probably pretty encouraged by some of the things they saw from this team with so many unknowns to come out and score 45 points and win by 19 to start the season. I think a lot of people are enjoying themselves today, and it made for a pretty good atmosphere overall.
We'll get you out of here on this. How should Tennessee fans feel leaving this win, or how do you feel about this Tennessee football team after watching one game and watching them pick up a win over Syracuse?
Yeah, I think there's enough there on both sides for some fans. I think you're going to hear a variety of opinions on this because in some ways we learned a few useful things about this team. In some ways, there's still some big unanswered questions, and one of them is what to make of this defensive performance. Is this, again, a good Syracuse team that's maybe going to put up points against everybody like they did last year? Or is this a sign that Tennessee's got some cracks in the foundation they're going to have to really address over the next few weeks to get ready for the meat of the SEC schedule? I think that's still to be determined. Again, I think 5 sacks, the 2 turnovers, the defensive touchdown, there's a lot to like on that side of the ball still, but it's a higher point total than I would have expected Tennessee to allow in this game going into it. So what do we make of that? Where does this team kind of go from here defensively? Again, we'll have to wait and see about what we hear about any of these injuries coming out today. Don't know, the status of a guy like Ricky Gibson or anyone like that. So we'll see if they have anyone that might have any sort of absence coming out of this game. But that's probably the big thing. And then I think you'll have some differing opinions still on Joey Aguilar. I think he looked good. I think some other people, he didn't throw any interceptions today. If he had, I think there'd be a little more division about his performance. But I think there's still some things to pick apart. Throwing high on some screens and short throws that are kind of gimmies to a lot of fans. That's a harder throw than you think, but still at the end of the day, when you're making throws at the line of scrimmage, people expect you to make that throw. And there were some of those and things like that were a little bit off the mark. And so a little bit of inconsistency there. But I think if you want to see some positives and think, hey, Tennessee could surprise some people, that's there. And if you want to look at the defense and some of the flaws here and there and say, hey, maybe Tennessee's still not as good as we thought, that's there too. I saw different reactions throughout the game on social media. Some fans saying, hey, Tennessee's defense, I'm not so sure. That's maybe an 8-4, 7-5 team. And I saw others saying, hey, Joey Aguilar looks good. I think Tennessee's going to surprise some people. So it's kind of whatever you want to make of this game, I think.
What's weird for me is like I still have the same overall opinion of this football team. Like I still think it's a 9-3 team, but the defense isn't as far along as I thought it was, but the offense is further ahead than I thought it was. So I come to the same conclusion, but kind of different, a different route to get there.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess the way I look at it is I would rather, if you ask me if I'm a Tennessee fan and what would I have preferred to see today, the defense dominate or the offense play better than expected and the defense maybe have an off day, I think I'd prefer it this way, because the biggest question, the most glaring questions about this team were what to make of the offense with 3 returning starters, with a new quarterback that just joined the program in May. If we were coming out of this game and it was 20-10 instead of 45-26, I think people would say, whoa, now Tennessee's defense is good, but are they going to have an offense that can beat anybody good in the SEC? Well, now you've got an offense that looks like it's capable of putting up some points against at least, a solid team. We'll see what they do against elite competition here in a couple of weeks, but against at least a solid team, they put up 45 points. So that answers a little bit of that question. And if I had any question marks coming out of game one, I'd rather have them on the defensive side of the ball, where this team has more known commodities, coming into this season. So I think that side of the ball, I trust Tim Banks. I think Rodney Garner deserves the benefit of the doubt. He's working with a little bit of a shorthanded group there today with all the injuries they dealt with without David Hobbs. So I think they're going to be fine on defense probably. And again, the 5 sacks, the 2 turnovers, those are good things to work on. And it's easier to work on any flaws you might have with a win, obviously, than having to deal with an early loss to learn some tough lessons. So I think they'll be fine on defense. And I think overall, yeah, Ben, I would agree. My prediction for their record this season probably didn't change based on today. But if I had to choose what I'd rather have in game one, I think you feel much better about the upside of this team, the ceiling. I think it's higher knowing the offense. If this is a sign of what this offense can do the rest of the year, I think this is where you start to think, okay, 10-2 is really possible with this team, because the reason people were doubting that going into the season was because they didn't think Joey Aguilar was going to be very good, and they didn't think the receivers were good enough. What we saw today kind of says that's not true.
Yeah, I say that the defense wasn't as far along as I thought it was, but as I've said a couple of times throughout this broadcast, I do think that today was a byproduct more of the injuries, and right now they don't seem to be long-term injuries, which is a good thing. Just a bunch of bumps and bruises today, and I think that really dictated things for them in the second half. So even though I say they're not as far along as I expected, I think there's reason for optimism. And I think this Tennessee defense this year, there's no red flags at the moment, despite today's performance. And I do think that we're more likely to see more of the first quarter Tennessee defense than the Tennessee defense we saw the last 2.5 quarters, certainly in the second half. So we'll see how that plays out. Ryan, greatly appreciate your coverage today. Safe travels back to Knoxville. What can people expect with a visit to GoVols247.com right now?
Yeah, already got plenty of coverage up on the site right now. Josh Heupel transcript, Joey Aguilar transcript. We'll have more on the defense. Josh Josephs had some interesting things to say about the defensive performance, some of the mistakes that showed up there. They also praised some of the young guys who played, like Ty Redmond, like Jaden Harmon. Colton Hood spoke as well about Ty Redmond and how much he's been impressed by him. So lots of good content coming up for wrapping up today's game and looking ahead to next week. And a great time to join the site if you're not already on GoVols247.com. 75% off an annual subscription for just a few days. So take advantage of our biggest sale of the year. And you can also pay full price for a monthly subscription and get instant access to Paramount Plus if you'd prefer to do it that way. That's a great value as well. But 75% off that. We only do that for a few days a year. So you definitely want to take advantage of that on GoVols247.com.
Appreciate everybody who tuned in live. This was a trial run. Patrick and I, we were texting, all three of us were texting about it, and we decided we weren't going to. And then Patrick and I got in here in the StreamYard studio, and that live button was very enticing, and we thought, why not? Why not do it? And this was a lot smoother and more simple than I was expecting. So we will certainly plan on doing these in the future throughout football season, maybe throughout the week. And I will certainly plan on them as we get into basketball and baseball season as well. So appreciate everybody who tuned in. If you're catching us here on the tail end, we'll have the full podcast posted here shortly. And of course, all of our coverage from Tennessee's big win over Syracuse in Atlanta posted at the site at GoVols247.com. For Patrick Brown and Ryan Callahan, I'm Ben McKee. This has been another edition of the GoVols247 Podcast, but a special post-game edition of the podcast.